When a reckless biker decided to kick a dog for fun, he had no idea the dog belonged to Ethan Cross. What began as a calm afternoon walk would soon spiral into a confrontation that proved one thing: you never mess with a man's dog. The concrete walls of Greywood District absorbed the heavy morning heat, wrapping around the bustling set of the action film Lone Shadow. The air hung thick with the scent of asphalt and the faint aroma of sizzling street food drifting from nearby vendors. Camera rigs sprawled across the set, cables snaking along the ground like dormant creatures. "That's a wrap for this scene, folks." The director's voice cut through the controlled chaos. "Lunch break for an hour. Meet back after." The crew let out a collective sigh, the exhaustion of an early morning shoot weighing on them. As the team dispersed, their conversations turned to food, gathering near the catering truck. "Hey, Ethan," one of them called out. "We're heading to that new deli on Maple Avenue. You coming?" Ethan Cross turned, his signature easy smile flashing, but his attention quickly shifted to the pit bull sitting quietly nearby. Rocky, the canine star of the film, panted heavily in the heat, his tongue hanging out as if pleading for relief. "You guys go ahead," Ethan replied, his gaze still on Rocky. "I think I'll take care of this guy and give him a walk. He looks like he needs it." A lanky crew member with a clipboard tucked under his arm, Carl, stepped forward. "I can handle Rocky, Mr. Cross. It's my job." Ethan raised a hand, his expression sincere. "I'd really like to do it, if that's okay. It'll help me connect with him for the next scene." He paused thoughtfully. "Besides, I've always wondered what it's like to own a dog, even if it's just for a little while." Carl hesitated, his brow furrowing. Ethan quickly added, "Don't worry, we won't go far. I'll make sure he gets some water and a snack." After a brief pause, Carl nodded. "All right, Mr. Cross, but just a heads up, Rocky's sweet, but he's strong." With Carl's approval, Ethan prepared for their outing. Carl handed him a durable leash, plastic bags, and a collapsible silicone bowl. Ethan attached the leash to Rocky's collar, the motion gentle and practiced. He tucked the remaining items into his leather jacket, patting his pockets to ensure nothing slipped out. Kneeling to Rocky's level, Ethan spoke softly. "You ready for a walk, buddy? Let's find you some water." Rocky's tail thumped the ground eagerly, the earlier discomfort fading under Ethan's attention. "I know you're thirsty," Ethan added, noting Rocky's panting. "Let's find you a fountain. I'll get you cooled off." Straightening up, Ethan glanced at the lingering crew members. "I'll see you guys in an hour," he called, waving casually as he led Rocky away from the film set and into the streets of Greywood. The midday sun reflected off the pavement in shimmering waves as Ethan and Rocky walked. The dog's panting grew louder, his need for water becoming more urgent. Ethan's eyes darted around, scanning for any sign of a water fountain or pet-friendly shop. As they turned a corner, a weathered building came into view. The sign above the door read Steel Fang, the letters worn but distinct. The low rumble of motorcycles vibrated in the air, and a line of gleaming bikes stood parked by the entrance like armored sentinels. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he assessed the scene. His grip on Rocky's leash tightened instinctively. The bar exuded raw energy, a stark contrast to the quaint cafes and bookstores that lined most of Greywood. Just as Ethan considered walking on, a glint of metal caught his attention. A public water fountain nestled between two motorcycles. Relief flooded him. Guiding Rocky to the fountain, Ethan knelt and retrieved the collapsible bowl from his pocket, snapping it into shape. He filled it with cool water, setting it down for Rocky, who lapped at it gratefully. As Rocky drank, Ethan stepped aside, allowing a burly, tattooed man to access the fountain. Tattoos coiled up the man's arms like vines, but his demeanor was calm as he filled his own bottle. Ethan watched the comings and goings at the bar. Some patrons swaggered in confidently, while others seemed tense, their eyes shifting constantly. To Ethan's mild surprise, a few of the bikers smiled at Rocky as they passed. One of them, the tattooed man, paused, giving Rocky a nod. "Nice dog," he said in a gravelly but warm voice. "Pit bulls get a bad rap, but they're loyal. People underestimate them, kind of like us bikers." Ethan nodded. "You're right about that. There's more beneath the surface." As they chatted, a waitress emerged from the bar, her apron crumpled but clean. She brightened when she spotted Rocky. "Oh, he's adorable," she cooed, crouching to offer her hand. Rocky responded with a soft lick, his tail wagging happily. He's better company than most of the guys in there, she joked, glancing over her shoulder at the bar. Ethan chuckled softly. I can believe that. With Rocky rehydrated, Ethan gathered their things and prepared to continue their walk. As they moved on, Ethan couldn't shake the lingering weight of the place. The bar's atmosphere left an uneasy feeling, one that hinted their peaceful walk might not stay that way for long. Some bikers swaggered inside, grinning confidently, while others moved cautiously, their eyes scanning the room as if trouble might erupt at any moment. To Ethan Cross's surprise, a few nodded at Rocky with unexpected warmth. The tattooed man from the fountain lingered nearby, his rough features softening into a smile. That's a good pit bull you've got there, he said, his voice gravelly but kind. People judge them wrong. Same with us bikers. They're loyal if you treat them right. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. You're right. There's more to them than people assume. As their conversation unfolded, the bar's front door swung open, and a waitress stepped outside. Her apron was slightly stained and exhaustion lined her face, but she brightened the moment she saw Rocky. Oh, look at you, she beamed, crouching to greet the dog. Rocky sniffed her hand and gave it a quick lick, his tail wagging. She laughed, scratching behind his ears. He's better behaved than most of the guys inside. Ethan chuckled. I can see that. He emptied the last bit of water from Rocky's bowl, folding the silicone dish and tucking it into his pocket. Thanks for the warm welcome, he said, giving the waitress a friendly wave as he and Rocky prepared to head down the street. They had barely walked a block when raised voices drifted from behind them. Ethan glanced back to see the same waitress engaged in a heated argument with a group of 5 bikers. Her posture was firm, but there was tension in her stance. I told you yesterday, your gang isn't welcome here anymore, she said, her voice ringing across the lot. After last time, the boss was clear. You're banned. The bikers loomed over her, faces twisted with irritation. One, a towering man with a shaved head, stepped closer. Move aside, sweetheart, he growled, or we'll move you. Ethan's grip on Rocky's leash tightened as the situation escalated. His instincts pushed him toward intervening, but a glance at Rocky reminded him of his responsibility to keep the dog safe. Before Ethan could make a decision, several other bikers emerged from the bar, positioning themselves around the waitress protectively. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with silver hair, spoke quietly but firmly. You heard her. Time to leave. The hostile bikers exchanged glances, but recognizing the odds, began to back down. Ethan exhaled, tugging Rocky's leash lightly. Come on, buddy, let's not stick around. As they walked several blocks away, Ethan couldn't shake the unease settling in his chest. The incident hinted at deeper tensions in the neighborhood, the kind that could bubble over at any time. Rocky's relaxed gait pulled him out of his thoughts. The dog seemed unaffected, trotting happily beside him. Ethan smiled. At least one of us is calm. They turned a corner into a quieter part of Graywood. Trees lined the streets, casting much-needed shade over the sidewalk. Ahead, a small cafe appeared, its outdoor patio bathed in the soft glow of string lights crisscrossing overhead. The atmosphere was serene, the cafe offering a stark contrast to the rough energy of the biker bar. A chalkboard near the entrance displayed the day's specials in playful, colorful lettering. Ethan's gaze drifted to the shaded seating area, a perfect spot to cool down and grab something to eat. Deciding this was as good a place as any, Ethan approached an empty table. Carefully, he unhooked Rocky's leash, settling into a chair. He pulled out another seat and patted it invitingly. Come on up, boy. You've earned it. Rocky needed no further encouragement. With surprising ease, he hopped onto the chair and curled up, resting his head on his paws. Nearby patrons smiled as they watched the well-behaved pit bull lounge calmly. A waitress appeared at the table, her name tag reading Maya. She carried herself with the practiced ease of someone who knew the job well but enjoyed it nonetheless. Afternoon, she greeted with a bright smile. The smile widened when she spotted Rocky. Oh, aren't you a handsome one, she added, addressing the dog directly. Ethan returned her smile. He knows it too. I hope it's all right, he's up here with me. Maya waved off the concern. As long as he behaves, he's welcome. She pulled out her notepad. What can I get for you today? Ethan glanced at the menu but didn't need long to decide. I'll take a coffee and a steak sandwich. And can you bring an extra plain steak for him? He motioned toward Rocky, who perked up at the mention of food. Maya laughed. Absolutely. 1 coffee, steak sandwich, and a little something for the gentleman here. Ethan chuckled. Thank you, Maya. As she headed back inside, Ethan leaned back in his chair. The sun filtered through the patio's canopy, and Rocky's contented sigh mirrored Ethan's own. For now, the troubles at Steel Fang felt far away. 1 coffee, 1 steak sandwich, and could I get an unsalted steak for my friend here? Ethan Cross nodded toward Rocky, who perked up at the mention of food, his ears twitching. Maya smiled, jotting down the order. Of course. 1 coffee, steak sandwich, and a little something for the distinguished gentleman, she added with a playful wink at Rocky. As Maya disappeared inside, Ethan leaned back, pulling a folded script from his jacket pocket. He spread it across the table, flipping through the pages with one hand, while the other occasionally reached over to scratch Rocky behind the ears. The pit bull rested his head on Ethan's lap, his body relaxed beneath the shaded patio. Just a little longer, buddy, Ethan murmured, glancing down as Rocky's tail thudded softly against the ground. Food's coming soon. The low hum of conversation drifted around the cafe. The quiet chatter, the rustling leaves overhead, and the faint clinking of cutlery created a peaceful ambiance, a brief reprieve from the tension earlier at Steel Fang. True to her word, Maya returned, placing a steaming cup of coffee in front of Ethan. Your steak is just about ready. Won't be long, she said with a smile. Ethan nodded in thanks, the rich aroma of the coffee stirring his senses. He wrapped his hands around the cup, letting its warmth seep into his fingers. His stomach growled softly, a reminder that breakfast had been hours ago. But just as he lifted the cup to his lips, the peaceful atmosphere shattered. A heavy-set man in a worn leather vest stalked past their table, his face twisted into a sneer as his gaze landed on Rocky. Filthy mutts, he muttered loudly, his voice dripping with contempt. Before Ethan could respond, the biker's boot shot out, striking Rocky's side. The pit bull yelped, the sound sharp and pained. In a flash, Rocky's whimper turned into a low, defensive growl, his body tensed, eyes wide. Ethan's chair scraped violently against the stone patio as he shot to his feet. His muscles coiled with adrenaline, and his normally calm demeanor darkened. His eyes, intense and unreadable, locked onto the man who now stood smirking at Rocky's reaction. What the hell do you think you're doing? Ethan's voice was low, but carried the weight of barely restrained anger. He stepped between Rocky and the biker, his body instinctively protective. The tables around them fell silent, all eyes drawn to the sudden confrontation. The biker flinched, but quickly masked it with bravado, spitting onto the ground near Ethan's boots. Control your dog, he snapped. Shouldn't be acting like that around people. Ethan's hand settled on Rocky's back, steadying him. The pit bull's growls quieted under his touch, though his gaze never left the man. Rocky only reacts to threats, Ethan said evenly. You're the one who crossed the line. The biker's lip curled in disdain. Coward dog, coward owner, he sneered. For a moment, Ethan's restraint wavered. His fist clenched around the collar of the biker's vest, yanking him closer. The cafe patrons gasped audibly, chairs scraping as some shifted nervously. But just as quickly, Ethan let go. His grip loosened, the biker's vest falling back into place. He inhaled deeply, grounding himself, aware of the silent crowd, and Maya's concerned eyes as she approached with their food. The biker, sensing Ethan's restraint, used it to his advantage. You'll regret that, he growled, brushing off the spot where Ethan had grabbed him. Both of you will. With a final sneer, he stalked away, his boots heavy against the patio stones. Ethan's eyes followed him until he disappeared down the street. But as the man left, Ethan caught a crucial detail. The insignia stitched onto the back of his vest. A snarling tiger with its claws outstretched. The same emblem he had seen earlier outside Steel Fang. A chill ran through Ethan's spine, though he pushed the thought aside for now. He turned his focus to Rocky, crouching beside the dog to check him over. You all right, buddy? Ethan whispered, running his hands gently along Rocky's ribs. No injuries, just startled nerves. The pit bull licked Ethan's hand in response, his tail wagging weakly. Ethan let out a slow breath of relief. I'm so sorry about that, Maya said quietly as she set the plates down. Her eyes flickered toward the direction the biker had gone. Are you both okay? Ethan nodded, offering her a reassuring smile. We're fine, I appreciate it. Maya frowned. They've been hanging around more often, harassing people. This is the first time I've seen one go after an animal, though. She lowered her voice. The owner's been trying to hire security, but it's been tough. They know how to intimidate. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, though he forced himself to relax. Thanks for the heads up, he said, settling back into his chair. As Maya excused herself, Ethan finally turned his attention to the meal. His stomach reminded him just how hungry he was, and the smell of grilled steak cut through his lingering frustration. Rocky had already forgotten the incident, his nose twitching toward the plate as he waited for his share. Ethan smiled, slicing off a portion of the unseasoned steak and setting it in front of Rocky. Here you go, pal. You've earned it. The pit bull dug in eagerly, and for the first time in what felt like hours, Ethan allowed himself to relax, if only for a moment. Perhaps that explained Ethan's impulsive reaction to the biker's provocation. The adrenaline was still coursing through him, but as he glanced down at Rocky, now sniffing at the steak with drool pooling at the corner of his mouth, Ethan chuckled softly. All right, buddy, he said, sliding the plate closer to the pit bull. Let's enjoy this. We've earned it. As they ate, Ethan's thoughts drifted back to the biker and his unsettling threat. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that somehow their paths would cross again before the day was done. But for now, he let the worry fade, focusing instead on the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with his new four-legged companion. Rocky, now fully engrossed in devouring his steak, seemed to have moved on from the incident entirely. When Ethan polished off the last bite of his sandwich, he checked his watch and was surprised to see how quickly time had slipped away. Lunch break was nearly over, and they needed to head back to the set. Time to go, boy, Ethan said, reaching over to pat Rocky's head. But first, I need to hit the restroom. You mind waiting here? Rocky tilted his head as if considering the question, then let out a sigh and curled comfortably into the chair. Ethan grinned at the dog's almost human-like demeanor. Standing up, Ethan secured Rocky's leash to the leg of the table, giving it a gentle tug to ensure it was tight. As Maya passed by with a tray of drinks, Ethan caught her attention. Would you mind keeping an eye on him for a few minutes? Ethan asked. I'll be quick. Maya's warm smile didn't waver. Of course, no problem at all. Ethan gave Rocky one last reassuring pat before weaving through the cafe towards the restroom at the back. To his dismay, there was a short line, but he decided to wait it out. The pressure in his bladder wasn't going anywhere. As the minutes crept by, Ethan's foot tapped anxiously. A faint unease gnawed at him, whispering that he shouldn't have left Rocky alone. He shook the thought away. The dog was safe under Maya's watch. Finally, after what felt longer than it probably was, Ethan emerged from the restroom and hurried back outside. But as he stepped onto the patio, his stomach dropped. Rocky was alone at the table, Maya nowhere in sight. Ethan's eyes narrowed, scanning the cafe for her. Then his gaze shifted to Rocky. The pit bull's chest rose and fell rapidly, his body heaving as if he were struggling to breathe. Rocky! Ethan rushed to his side, his mind racing. The dog's eyes were wide and unfocused, his tongue lolling awkwardly as he pawed at his mouth. Ethan knelt beside him, panic tightening his chest. Rocky was choking. Water! Ethan's voice was sharp and urgent as he called out, I need water. A younger waitress with Lila printed on her name tag appeared almost immediately, clutching a bottle of water. Ethan took it without hesitation, carefully tilting Rocky's head up and pouring small sips between his teeth. Come on, boy, Ethan whispered, rubbing Rocky's throat in gentle motions. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with a final deep cough, Rocky managed to swallow whatever had lodged in his throat. His body sagged with exhaustion, but the choking fit had passed. Ethan exhaled shakily, relief flooding his system. He stroked Rocky's head gently. Good boy, you're okay. Maya returned moments later, her face flushed with embarrassment. I'm so sorry, she blurted out. The kitchen needed me, but I asked Lila to keep an eye on him. Lila, shifting nervously beside her, glanced at Ethan. There was a man, she said hesitantly. He seemed friendly. He fed the dog a sausage. I thought it was fine. Ethan's heart sank as Lila described the man. Bearded, stocky, leather gloves. And the kicker, the tiger claw insignia on his vest. Steel fang. This wasn't an accident. Ethan's eyes hardened as the realization hit. The biker from earlier had poisoned Rocky. Is there a vet nearby? Ethan asked urgently, his voice sharper than he intended. His gaze darted between Maya and Lila. Maya nodded quickly. 3 blocks down. Take a left at the next intersection, you can't miss it. Thank you, Ethan said. Already pulling money from his pocket, he left a generous tip, along with payment for the meal, and prepared to leave. But as Ethan stood, Rocky's legs buckled beneath him. The pit bull collapsed, his body limp against the patio floor. Ethan knelt immediately, gathering Rocky into his arms. The dog's weight was significant, but adrenaline fueled Ethan's movements. There was no time to lose. Hang in there, boy, Ethan muttered as he hoisted Rocky up. Maya and Lila exchanged stunned glances as Ethan, without another word, took off down the street in a sprint. His heart pounded with every step, but he didn't stop. Pedestrians parted as he ran, some pausing to watch the sight of a man carrying a large pit bull through the busy streets. But Ethan's focus never wavered. Rocky's breathing had slowed, his whimpers faint against Ethan's chest. Ethan only tightened his grip, his feet pounding the pavement. The only thing that mattered was getting Rocky to safety, before it was too late. The 3 blocks to the veterinary clinic stretched endlessly, each step feeling heavier than the last. Ethan Cross's breath came in sharp bursts, his heart thudding as he cradled Rocky in his arms. The pit bull's body felt limp, his breathing shallow and uneven. Sweat dripped down Ethan's forehead, but he barely noticed, his focus locked entirely on the fragile life in his arms. Rocky's faint whimper sliced through the haze of panic clouding Ethan's mind. Stay with me, boy, Ethan murmured, holding him closer. When the bright white facade of Greystone Animal Clinic finally came into view, Ethan felt an overwhelming surge of relief. The blue cross symbol above the entrance glowed like a beacon of hope. Bursting through the front doors, he barely registered the curious glances of the other waiting pet owners. Please, Ethan's voice was hoarse, barely louder than a whisper but filled with urgency. My dog, he's been poisoned. The reception area, previously calm, erupted into swift action. A woman in blue scrubs appeared almost immediately. Her name tag read Dr. Ellen Mercer. Her sharp eyes flicked between Ethan and the struggling dog in his arms. This way, she said briskly, guiding Ethan down the hall to an examination room. Ethan gently laid Rocky on the cold metal table. His hands lingered on the dog's fur for a moment before stepping back. Rocky's chest rose and fell unsteadily, his paws twitching faintly. Dr. Mercer immediately began her examination, her hands moving with precision and urgency. Tell me exactly what happened, she said, her gaze fixed on Rocky's pupils as she checked for signs of neurological damage. Ethan's words tumbled out in a rush. We were at a cafe. Someone fed him a sausage. One of those bikers I'd seen earlier. I think it was laced with something. He started choking and collapsed not long after. Dr. Mercer nodded, her expression grave. She gently lifted Rocky's eyelids, then ran her hands down his abdomen, feeling for abnormalities. His pupils are dilated, she said softly. It's consistent with poisoning, likely narcotics or something toxic, given how quickly it's progressing. Turning to the nurse assisting her, Dr. Mercer gave instructions calmly but urgently. Start him on activated charcoal to absorb whatever's in his system. We need blood tests immediately. IV fluids too. Let's flush this out as fast as possible. The nurse, a young man with glasses named Eric, hurried to gather supplies. Ethan's chest tightened as he watched. Is he going to be all right? Dr. Mercer's eyes softened slightly as she met Ethan's gaze. We'll do everything we can, but we caught it early. That's a good sign. Ethan swallowed hard, nodding as he took a shaky step back. His eyes never left Rocky as the medical team worked quickly. He felt helpless, watching as Rocky lay unmoving on the table. Please, whatever it takes, Ethan said. Just save him. Dr. Mercer gave a reassuring nod before focusing fully on the task at hand. As Ethan was gently ushered into the waiting room, the weight of the moment began to sink in. The sterile smell of antiseptic, the faint hum of soft music playing in the background, and the low murmurs of other pet owners formed a strange backdrop to his spiraling thoughts. With trembling hands, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed Daniel Ward, the film's director. Ethan, what's going on? Lunch break ended 20 minutes ago. Ethan's voice cracked slightly as he explained the situation. Rocky's been poisoned. We're at the vet clinic. It's bad, Daniel. The line went quiet for a moment before Daniel sighed heavily. Forget the shoot, take care of him, we'll reschedule, just keep me updated. Thanks, I appreciate it, Ethan said, his voice thick with gratitude. After ending the call, Ethan contacted Carl, the dog handler on set. He knew Carl would need to document everything for insurance and potentially for legal reasons. As Ethan waited for Carl to arrive, he slumped into one of the chairs, feeling the weight of the day press down on him. It was supposed to be a simple walk, a chance to bond with Rocky and clear his head. Now it felt like he had stepped into something darker, something that wasn't finished yet. Somewhere out there, the man who did this was walking free. Ethan's jaw clenched as the thought lingered. He had always believed in taking the high road, choosing diplomacy over confrontation. But the image of Rocky collapsing, his body helpless, gnawed at something deep inside Ethan. Was it justice he wanted? Or vengeance? The clock on the waiting room wall ticked loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. Other pet owners sat nearby, their quiet conversations blending into the hum of the clinic. But Ethan barely noticed them. His world had narrowed to the closed doors separating him from Rocky. Finally, at exactly 1:42 p.m., though it felt like hours later, Dr. Mercer reappeared. Her expression was serious, but not grim, which Ethan took as a hopeful sign. "Mr. Cross," she said, taking a seat beside him, clipboard in hand. Ethan leaned forward, his heart pounding. "How is he? Is Rocky going to be okay?" Mercer nodded slowly. "Rocky is stable, but he's not out of the woods yet. The blood tests confirmed our suspicions." Ethan braced himself. "We found traces of a strong narcotic mixed with chemicals similar to rat poison. It's a dangerous combination, potentially lethal if not treated quickly." Ethan's blood ran cold at the words. This wasn't random. It was deliberate. "The good news," Dr. Mercer continued, "is that we caught it in time. The activated charcoal is doing its job, and the IV fluids are flushing his system. We've also started him on specific antidotes." Ethan let out a shaky breath of relief, though a knot of anger coiled in his chest. "Thank you, doctor. Truly." Dr. Mercer offered a kind smile. "He's a fighter. We'll keep him here for the next 24 hours to monitor for complications." As Ethan sat back, the weight in his chest eased, but the fight wasn't over. "Mr. Cross," Carl said, rushing over. "I got here as fast as I could. How's Rocky doing?" Ethan stood, offering a brief but detailed summary of the situation. As he spoke, he felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper on his shoulders. He had taken Rocky out, and he had inadvertently walked them straight into danger. "I need to handle something," Ethan said quietly, his voice steady with newfound resolve. "Can you stay here and watch over him?" Carl hesitated, looking confused. "Of course, but where are you going?" Ethan's expression darkened slightly, his gaze distant but fierce. "To find the person responsible for this." Carl opened his mouth to protest but seemed to recognize the resolve in Ethan's stance. Instead, he nodded, reaching for Rocky's leash and supplies. "I've got him," Carl said reassuringly. Ethan turned to Dr. Mercer. "I'll cover any costs. Just do whatever it takes." "We will," Dr. Mercer promised with a soft nod. Ethan lingered at the door for a heartbeat, his eyes trailing to the room where Rocky lay resting under the clinic's care. Then, with quiet determination, he stepped outside. The air felt heavier as Ethan walked through the streets of Greywood. His destination was clear, the place where this all began. Steel Fang Bar. The sun hung lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalks. Ethan's footsteps were measured, his mind clear. This wasn't about revenge, he told himself. It was about justice, about making sure whoever did this couldn't harm anyone else, animal or human. And yet, beneath the logic, anger simmered just below the surface. As the bar came into view, Ethan paused across the street. Steel Fang loomed ahead, its weathered brick exterior standing out against the more polished buildings nearby. The familiar rumble of motorcycles reverberated in the distance, adding to the charged atmosphere. Ethan took a deep breath, grounding himself. This could turn ugly fast. Even as he stood there, his actor instincts kicking in, Ethan's eyes scanned for details. A cluster of bikers lingered outside the entrance, laughing loudly and throwing occasional glances at passing pedestrians. He recognized them. Several had been present at the cafe. Their postures exuded dominance, each movement aggressive, yet calculated. The waitress who had stood her ground earlier was missing. Instead, an anxious-looking male employee swept near the entrance, his eyes flicking nervously toward the group. Ethan lingered by the curb, studying the scene. Marching in head-on wouldn't help Rocky, or himself. As much as the thought of confrontation tugged at him, his rational side urged caution. Eventually, after the last of the bikers filed into the bar, Ethan crossed the street, approaching the nervous employee. "Rough crowd," Ethan said casually, nodding toward the door. The employee's grip tightened on the broom. His eyes widened in recognition before darting quickly to the entrance. "You have no idea," the young man muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's brow furrowed. "The waitress, Maya, is she all right?" The man hesitated, lowering his voice. "She's in the hospital. Those guys put her there yesterday. Busted her arm when she refused to serve them." Ethan felt a flash of anger but kept his voice calm. "How long has this been happening?" The employee sighed heavily, glancing around as if the walls had ears. "A few months. They show up, start trouble, and leave before the police arrive. No one does anything." Ethan leaned in slightly. "What about the owner? Has he tried to stop it?" The young man scoffed. "He's scared. We all are. You can't blame him. These guys don't just leave after you tell them to." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What's their deal? Drugs?" The employee gave a reluctant nod. "Probably. They use the bar like it's their turf. And that guy with the tiger emblem?" He shook his head. "He's the worst of them." Ethan's jaw tightened. He could still picture the sneer on the biker's face, the way he kicked Rocky without hesitation. "You should get out of here," Ethan advised quietly. The young man's grip on the broom faltered. "You think I haven't tried?" He flexed his hand, wincing slightly. "Last time I threatened to quit, I ended up with 2 broken fingers." Ethan's fists clenched at his sides, the weight of the situation deepening. This wasn't just about Rocky anymore. "Listen," Ethan said, lowering his voice, "I might know someone who can help." The employee raised a skeptical brow. "Help how?" "The cops don't care." Ethan met his gaze. "Not the cops, someone better." Without elaborating, Ethan turned and walked away, leaving the employee staring after him. His next stop wasn't the bar, not yet. First, he needed to make a call. The employee's shoulders slumped, the weight of the situation visibly etched across his face. "It's been months now. It keeps getting worse." He flexed his hand unconsciously, wincing at the movement. "Last month, they broke my nose and 2 fingers when I tried to cut one of them off. Nessa, the waitress, they hurt her too. I've been thinking about quitting, but..." Ethan Cross tilted his head slightly, encouraging him to continue. "But what?" The man hesitated before sighing. "I handed in my resignation letter. The boss wouldn't accept it. He begged me to stay until they find someone else. Said he needs all hands on deck to deal with this." The employee gestured vaguely toward the bar's entrance. Ethan frowned. A spark of frustration lit within him. "That's not right. You shouldn't have to put yourself at risk like this." The employee shrugged helplessly. "The boss knows where I live. I'm worried if I just walk away." His voice trailed off, the unspoken fear hanging between them. As they talked, Ethan's gaze shifted to the bar's grimy windows. Inside, shadows shifted as bikers argued loudly with other patrons. The staff cowered behind the counter, avoiding eye contact with the troublemakers. The scene confirmed what Ethan already suspected. A direct confrontation wouldn't solve anything. Not today. Any attempt at stepping inside could ignite something worse. And if Ethan got involved, it wasn't just his safety at risk, it was everyone else's. Ethan took a slow breath, his thoughts crystallizing. This needs to end, but not like this. One name flashed in his mind, someone he trusted, Sheriff Lucas Monroe. A longtime friend, and someone who understood how to handle these kinds of situations quietly and decisively. Ethan turned to the employee, speaking with quiet resolve. "I think I know someone who can help." The man's tired eyes flickered with the faintest hint of hope. "Who are you calling?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Someone who can stop this, legally and safely. Just stay low and keep your head down. Help is coming." The employee nodded, stepping back as Ethan pulled his phone from his jacket. With a steady hand, Ethan dialed. As the line rang, he paced a few steps down the sidewalk, keeping the bar within view. "Lucas," Ethan said as soon as the sheriff picked up. "It's Ethan. I need your help. There's trouble down at Steel Fang Bar in Graywood." Lucas's tone shifted immediately, sharpening. "What kind of trouble?" Ethan kept his voice low. "Bikers. One of them poisoned Rocky, my dog. Same crew that's been intimidating businesses around here. I'm standing across the street from the bar now." A pause followed. When Lucas finally spoke, his voice was calm but serious. "Stay put, don't engage them, Ethan. I'll have officers there in minutes." "I trust you," Ethan replied, ending the call. Tucking his phone away, Ethan's eyes lifted toward the bar's entrance again. The employee had retreated to the doorway, broom in hand but nerves frayed. "Did you call the cops?" the man asked, stepping closer, his voice barely audible. Ethan nodded. Panic flashed across the employee's face. No, you don't understand. If the police come, this business could get shut down. The boss will." Ethan raised a hand, gently cutting him off. "Think about it. What's left to protect here? A place that lets criminals call the shots? A business that can't protect you or Nessa?" The man swallowed hard but said nothing. Ethan's voice softened. "You deserve better than this. There should be security guards out front, not waitstaff taking the hits." The employee nodded slowly, eyes dropping to the ground as Ethan's words sank in. "You're right," he whispered. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant wail of sirens. Within minutes, several police vehicles arrived, slowing as they approached the bar. No lights, no fanfare. Silent and tactical. Ethan stepped back, observing as officers quietly exited their cars, moving with precision. Sheriff Monroe's arrival wasn't a chaotic show. It was efficient and calculated. From his vantage point across the street, Ethan watched as the officers breached the bar. Through the window, he saw the sudden shift. Tables were overturned, patrons corralled, and the bikers visibly outnumbered. Conversations from inside spilled out to the street as the officers methodically worked their way through the crowd. Ethan overheard snatches of dialogue, mentions of narcotics, illegal weapons, and more than a few violations. His chest tightened as an officer emerged with a duffel bag filled with pills and small vials. This wasn't just personal possession. It was distribution. Bikers were cuffed, one by one, their aggression replaced by reluctant compliance. Ethan's gaze remained steady, watching as the leader, the man with the tiger emblem, was led out last. His sneer had disappeared, replaced by something colder. Their eyes met across the street. The biker's lip curled in recognition, but Ethan didn't flinch. Relief flooded Ethan's chest as the final arrest took place. Justice was being served. The threat, to Rocky, to the neighborhood, was finally neutralized. Ethan lingered as the last of the officers filed out, listening as they debriefed among themselves. The bikers' operations were bigger than expected, with weapons found in the storage area behind the bar. Lucas approached Ethan, shaking his head lightly. "Looks like you stumbled onto something big." Ethan crossed his arms, exhaling slowly. "I wasn't planning to. I just wanted to take my dog for a walk." Lucas chuckled. "Well, that walk might have just cleaned up half this block. You did good, Ethan." Ethan nodded, though his thoughts drifted back to Rocky. "Still at the vet, still fighting." "Thanks for coming," Ethan said softly. Lucas clapped him on the shoulder. "Go check on your dog. We've got this handled." And with that, Ethan finally turned away from the bar, leaving behind the weight of confrontation as he made his way back to Greystone Clinic, where his real concern waited. The flashing lights from the police cruisers painted the street in hues of red and blue, their glow reflecting off nearby windows and drawing curious onlookers. Ethan Cross stood at the edge of the crowd, slipping on his sunglasses as the murmurs of recognition began to ripple around him. He wasn't here for attention. With the last of the bikers loaded into police vehicles, Ethan's thoughts drifted back to Rocky. The immediate danger was gone. Now, all that mattered was ensuring the pitbull made a full recovery and returned safely to the film set. Ethan cast one last glance at Steel Fang Bar, now swarmed by officers collecting evidence and questioning patrons. Satisfied, he turned and began walking back toward Greystone Animal Clinic. The day had spiraled into something unexpected, but there was closure in knowing the ones responsible would face justice. As Ethan crossed the street, he found himself face to face with one of the last bikers being led to a squad car, the same man who had kicked Rocky at the cafe. Recognition flickered in the biker's eyes, a flash of anger mingled with something else, fear. Time seemed to slow as their gazes locked. Ethan felt a surge of emotion, anger, disgust, and something deeper, something closer to pity. This man's choices had brought him here, shackled and surrounded by law enforcement. Taking a steady breath, Ethan spoke, his voice low and measured. "You know," he said, tilting his head slightly, There's a saying that fits this moment. You don't mess with a man's dog. The biker sneered, but Ethan caught the slight tremor in his hands as he struggled against the officer holding him. I hope that dog didn't make it, the biker spat, venom in his tone. Ethan's expression remained unreadable, his voice calm but edged with steel. He did, Ethan replied simply. And now, you'll have plenty of time to think about why hurting him seemed like a good idea. Ethan turned away without another word, ignoring the string of obscenities hurled at his back as officers shoved the biker into the squad car. The man's protests faded behind him, and Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The confrontation was brief, but it was enough. He had looked the man responsible in the eye and had chosen restraint over retaliation. The streets that had once witnessed Ethan's frantic rush with an injured Rocky now saw his steady, purposeful walk back toward the clinic. By the time Ethan stepped through the glass doors of Greystone Animal Clinic, the tension that had gripped him earlier had eased. Dr. Ellen Mercer was waiting for him in the reception area, arms crossed, but with a faint, tired smile softening her features. Mr. Cross, she greeted, I'm happy to report Rocky is stabilizing, the antidotes are working, and the poison is clearing from his system. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Relief washed over him in waves. That's the best news I've heard all day, Ethan said. What happens next? Dr. Mercer gestured for him to follow. We'll keep him under observation for the next 24 hours, she explained as they walked. We want to monitor for any delayed reactions, but his vitals are looking strong. He's responding well to fluids and medication. We'll start him on anti-nausea drugs and liver protectants to ensure there are no lingering effects. As they reached the recovery area, Ethan's eyes immediately found Rocky. The pit bull lay curled on a soft bed, a few wires and monitors attached to him. Despite the equipment, Rocky's tail thumped weakly against the cushion when he saw Ethan approach. The sight brought a lump to Ethan's throat. Hey buddy, Ethan whispered, kneeling beside him. He gently stroked Rocky's head, feeling the warmth of the dog's fur beneath his palm. You're gonna be okay. We got the bad guys. Dr. Mercer observed the interaction with a soft smile. If there are no complications, he can go home tomorrow, she said. Just follow the medication schedule and stick to the special diet. His prognosis is good. Ethan nodded, absorbing every detail. I'll be here first thing in the morning to pick him up. We'll be ready, Dr. Mercer assured him. As Ethan lingered by Rocky's side, his attention drifted to the small television mounted in the corner of the reception area. The local news broadcast flashed images of the police raid at Steel Fang, accompanied by headlines detailing the arrests. The reporter highlighted multiple charges: possession of illegal substances, weapons, and assault. One segment focused specifically on the animal cruelty charges, mentioning that dog fur had been found on one suspect's boots. Tests were still pending, but the connection was obvious. Ethan watched in silence, satisfaction blooming quietly within him. Justice was unfolding not just for Rocky, but for the community as a whole. He was relieved to note that his involvement hadn't been mentioned. Sheriff Monroe had kept his promise about discretion. The report continued, revealing that Steel Fang Bar would be closed indefinitely pending further investigation. The owner was facing questioning, and the future of the establishment seemed uncertain. Ethan exhaled, knowing the neighborhood would be safer moving forward. As Ethan prepared to leave the clinic, he felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, exhaustion, and gratitude. The day had been filled with unexpected twists, but standing there beside Rocky, Ethan knew they had come through the other side stronger. He patted Rocky's head one last time before quietly exiting the clinic. Tomorrow, he'd return. And when Rocky walked back onto the film set, it wouldn't just be as a co-star, but as a survivor. The day had been a whirlwind of fear, anger, and, at last, relief. But as Ethan Cross stepped out of Greystone Animal Clinic into the fading light, he felt something deeper, an unshakable bond with Rocky that extended far beyond their on-screen partnership. They had faced something real together, and that experience would undoubtedly shape their performances. Rocky wasn't just his co-star now. They were connected in a way that no amount of training or rehearsals could replicate. Ethan gave the pit bull one final, gentle pat before turning to Dr. Mercer with a grateful smile. "Thank you for everything," Ethan said sincerely. Dr. Mercer nodded. He's lucky to have you. Ethan stepped into the cool evening air, feeling the weight of the day slowly lift. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, adjusting the film's schedule, managing Rocky's continued recovery. But for now, Ethan allowed himself to appreciate the small victory. They had cleared a significant hurdle, and that was enough. As he walked back to his hotel, the streets of Greywood felt different. The air seemed lighter, the neighborhood quieter, as if the resolution at Steel Fang Bar had somehow shifted the very atmosphere. Ethan's thoughts drifted back to Rocky. What had started as a casual walk to help him bond with the dog for their film had become a life-or-death struggle. It wasn't the script that had tested him today, but his own courage and resolve. He couldn't help but wonder how this experience would affect their scenes together. There was no faking trust, no fabricating the loyalty that had been forged between them. Whatever came next for the film, Ethan knew it would feel more authentic than ever before. As Ethan neared the hotel, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Daniel Ward, the film's producer. Taking a deep breath, Ethan answered, "Hey, Daniel." "Ethan?" Daniel's voice carried a mix of concern and underlying frustration. "How's Rocky?" Ethan kept his response concise, outlining Rocky's condition and the positive prognosis Dr. Mercer had given. As he spoke, he could almost hear the producer mentally recalculating the production schedule. "This is going to delay us," Daniel sighed. "We'll have to shift some of your scenes forward, maybe shoot around Rocky until he's back." "I get it," Ethan replied, "but his health comes first. We can't rush this." There was a pause, then Daniel's voice softened. "You're right. We'll make it work. Vet says he'll be good to go in a few days." "That's the hope," Ethan confirmed. "I'll pick him up tomorrow and stay on top of his recovery." They spent a few more minutes going over the schedule, adjusting where necessary. Ethan was surprised and a little relieved by Daniel's willingness to accommodate Rocky's recovery. It was a reminder that the industry was beginning to value its animal actors as more than just props. By the time Ethan reached the hotel, the call had ended, leaving him feeling more optimistic. Just as he stepped into the lobby, his phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text from Sheriff Lucas Monroe. "Operation successful. All suspects in custody. Evidence secured. Your involvement remains confidential. Well done, Ethan." A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips as he read the message. Lucas had handled things exactly as expected, efficiently and discreetly. The danger was gone. The neighborhood was safer. And most importantly, Rocky was going to be okay. Ethan tucked his phone away, knowing this wasn't the end of his journey with Rocky. Tomorrow would bring a new day, new scenes to film, and a stronger bond with his four-legged co-star. As he finally drifted off to sleep that night, a quiet satisfaction settled over Ethan. They had faced adversity together and emerged stronger on the other side.